I believe that this custom PC is in the sweet spot between economy class and overkill. I call it a future-proof PC, a machine that will serve you as a working tool with no significant compromises for at least 6 years. Two conditions here. I assume that you use it as a working tool, not a gaming center or something like this. And the second, you keep things organized and you know how to use proxies or transcode footage if needed. If you think about it, $1,500 for a professional tool is not really that much. 6 years is equal to 72 months, so it's approximately $20 a month. Chances are you make that amount in an hour. So when it comes to the most important hardware tool for editing, not counting your brain, that's not really that bad, is it? I know that some of you just want to see the list of components I used, so here it is. You can find all the links in the description of the video. In the future, I will update these links for options I would choose at a given time. Could I go with more expensive and better performing parts? Sure I could, but it's not a secret that the law of diminishing returns is in place and I like to get the most bang for a buck. Before I proceed, it's really important that I state what this video is and what it's not. So please note that the focus of this video is to highlight the most important considerations one needs to make if he or she wants to build a custom PC for editing tasks. But I'm not a PC expert by any means, and this is not supposed to be a complete PC building tutorial or review of specific pieces of hardware. We start with the heart of any computer, which is the Central Processing Unit, CPU. I've chosen Ryzen 7 3700X because it's quite a powerful unit for a reasonable price. By the rule of thumb, you want to buy the best CPU you can afford because all the footage will have to be processed by it to some extent. My CPU has 8 cores. Even though the more cores the better, most CPUs top out their performance in editing software with about 8 cores. Probably it has to do with software architecture and more cores will be utilized in the software in the future. Having an MA4 socket gives me an option to upgrade to Ryzen 9 in the future if I feel it's needed. For example, Ryzen 9 3950X, which has 16 cores. Common thread is that NVIDIA graphic cards are better than AMD for video work. I don't know why, but it seems to be true, although the difference is not that huge. Linus has a great and very insightful video on the topic, so if you want to see more real-life comparisons, go over there. Anyway, I decided to go with NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2060 Super. And while a good GPU is definitely more important if you're editing on DaVinci Resolve, it seems that the general trend is to put more and more workforce on GPU. And while CPU will be still more important for editing in Premiere Pro, I decided I need to invest in a good GPU as well for 2 reasons. First, I will probably edit more in Resolve in the coming years because it's getting pretty powerful and I want to be fluent with more NLEs. And the second, I believe that Adobe will utilize more and more GPU power as well. Now, the spine of any PC. I knew I wanted a motherboard to have built-in Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, 2 M.2 ports, and as many USB ports as possible. These conditions are hard to find in a cheap motherboard, and since it's like a skeleton of your custom PC, you better invest in it. After all, you want it to be upgradable. There is only one thing I wish my X570 Gaming Edge Wi-Fi motherboard had that it doesn't. I'll get back to it by the end of the video. Besides that, it's all good. I can connect any Bluetooth device that I want. I don't need any external Wi-Fi card. I can add more RAM in the future. I have USB 3.1 Generation 2 on the board with USB-C connector. MA4 socket lets me upgrade CPU in the future if that's necessary, and 2 M.2 ports let me set up my data in the right way. Speaking of which, I bought Intel 660p 1TB SSD, which is crazy fast. It goes up to 1800 megabytes per second, both read and write. I also had a spare Samsung 970 EVO. Having these 2 SSD, we can set up our system, data, and cache files. As I've said in my video about cache files management, check it out here, it's best to have one disk dedicated to operating system and software, one for media cache files, and the footage and data should be kept separately on other disks. And of course it's still true, but for my machine I'm testing a slightly different approach. Operating system and software don't need crazy fast speeds of Intel SSD. So for that I'm using Samsung 970 EVO. I've divided Intel SSD into 3 partitions. One is used for media cache files only. The second one is for data that I keep on any cloud solution like Google Drive and Dropbox. And the third partition is for footage. While it may look like I'm violating a rule I've always preached, I really think it might be a really good solution. With data bandwidth of this disk reaching 1800 megabytes per second, I'm pretty sure that both media cache files and footage clips will have enough room to exist in. Also, I will edit out of this SSD very occasionally, and the footage will live there only temporarily. Actually, even if the whole SSD would die for some reason, I'll be fine. I would never use the only copy of important footage to edit with. And all cache files and data from the cloud can be easily restored. For random access memory, I went with 32 GB Corsair Vengeance. I would say that for a professional working station 32 gigs is an optimal amount, but I made sure to have it in 2 sticks so I can upgrade to 64 gigs in the future if I want to. One important thing here, it actually does matter how you put 2 memory sticks in those 4 slots. So read your motherboard instructions to put them in the right way. Power supply unit may seem like an irrelevant choice, but if you want your PC to be future-proof, you need to make sure it can provide the power you might need in the future. You can use a calculator to approximate the minimum watt value. Take into account the number of USB devices you might have plugged in, reserve some more power for CPU, especially if you consider upgrading it to a better model in the future. I chose Seasonic Focus Plus Gold 850, which also has a modular build so you can keep your cables nice and clean. By all costs, avoid buying a PCU of an unknown brand and low output power. It's like inviting troubles to your doorsteps. I've put all of these components inside the NZXT H510 case. Many people are recommending this case. It looks good, the cost is relatively low, and it has a pretty good cable management features to keep an interior eye-pleasing. And last but not least, I use Windows 10 Pro. It is a bit more expensive than the home version, but it has a few features that are helpful. For example, improved security, and in my opinion the most important one, you can postpone Windows updates. The last thing you want is facing compatibility issues with the updated operating system while working under the deadline. Do yourself a favor and postpone the update until any major compatibility issues are addressed and fixed. And now I need to mention 3 things I had no idea about when ordering the parts. As I've said, my motherboard has USB 3.1 generation 2 at the back. Unfortunately, I didn't think about an additional USB-C port for the case. It's also 3.1 generation 2, but I don't have any additional ports like that on the motherboard. At this point, the only solution I have is to buy an adapter that will make the USB-C port work, but the speed will be limited to 3.1 generation 1 standard. Another surprise I had was with the case. It's made out of sanded metal and it gets dirty from simply touching it. But you can clean it pretty easily, so that's not a big deal. And the last thing that I really should have thought about are GPU output ports. I will continue using my old monitors and none of them has a display port. So I'll have to buy some additional cables. For now I could connect only one. I could see it coming, I know. Now, if you want to learn about how a standing desk can affect your editing routines and your daily life, be sure to watch this video. Once again, all the components that I used are linked in the description. Please subscribe, ring the bell, and see you next time.